Hello there, friends and sane persons. It's Wednesday, which means it's time for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Wednesday Whimsy is, of course, a short show I do every Wednesday evening where I talk about a board game topic, a top 10, something related to gaming in that means, or sometimes I show the stem on my light. uh, anyway, every Wednesday evening, I'm a little early tonight, but at least it's Wednesday. That's Anyway. So today, what I have to talk about is something brand new. It arrived just last week, and I played it a few times already, enough sort of to form an opinion on it. And I just thought, well, hey, it's interesting enough that it might be fun to talk about. And that game is, let me get it up here, Rolling Heights. So Rolling Heights is an unusual game. It's from AEG, and it really feels like almost an iteration on another game that I wasn't a huge fan of called Cubitos, which was a game where you were rolling dice and sort of buying different dice and then eventually, racing around a track, that kind of thing. In Rolling Heights, that's not what you're doing at all. Instead, you're rolling something, and that something is a bunch of meeples. And so each player, is going to be rolling these meeples and then building a city. And you're building buildings. You're sort of getting the building blocks using the meeples. And there you can see a picture. Ultimately, you're building some sort of a big city with skyscrapers. It's thematically set in the 1920s, although that certainly doesn't come across. But you're trying to build up these buildings. These buildings are going to give you points. They're going to give you new meeples that you'll be able to roll. They're going to give you special abilities, allow you to do different things. You also have, an end game scoring goal you're trying to achieve, and there are sort of some global goals. But ultimately, you're trying to get as many points as possible by rolling meeples and building buildings. So let's talk a little bit about how it works. And I've already kind of given the game away in that you are rolling your meeples. That's kind of the shtick of the game. And this actually looks like it must be a prototype because those aren't the pieces that I have in mind. But that's okay. You've got this little box here, and you can kind of see it over here. And a good lot of the game can be played simultaneously, but you'll pick up your box, you'll roll your meeples in it, and the meeples are going to be, they're going to land in the box either lying sort of flat, lying on their heads or sides, or standing upright. And based upon the position that they land in, that's going to sort of tell you how strong of the action you're going to get to go with that meeple. And so you will roll the meeples, you'll take out any that are standing upright or on their heads or sides, and leave any flat ones in the box. If you haven't yet rolled, taken at least half of them out, you're going to roll again, and you keep going until you've got at least half of your meeples kind of in front of you on the table. And then that's sort of the roll phase. Then there's what's called the risk phase. If you want to, you can keep rolling. And as long as at least one meeple ends up standing up or on its side, then no problem. But if you roll and they all land flat, well, that's a bust, and you're going to lose some of your active meeples. They go on strike, and you're going to get just a sort of a small consolation. Anyway, that's kind of the main core aspect of the game. And then you're going to take your meeples, and when it's your turn in turn order, you're going to activate them. The meeples that are standing up, they're said to be working hard, and they sort of get a double action, a double portion. There's, 10 different colors. There's clear ones, gray ones, blue ones, and brown ones, and those are going to give you access to the four basic sort of building blocks of the game. And then the other ones, the other colors are going to have different special abilities that they can use. And so you'll get your building materials from your meeples. You will activate any other ones, and then ultimately you're able to buy one of these building tiles and sort of put your building blocks on it. And each building tile is going to have a certain combination that it needs. For example, you can see this one right here is going to need a whole great big tower. This one kind of in the middle, and it'll be worth 20 points when it's completed, and it'll also give you access to a purple meeple. And then you can sort of see if you look way in, and of course that zooms nicely into the wrong part, but if you look way in, you can see that that purple meeple gives you access to some sort of a bonus action that you can do with purple meeple. So, for example, if it's on its side, you can get 2 points, and if it's standing up, you'd get 3. And there's a bunch of different ones. The different buildings, you can kind of see there's a spot here that tells you how many of a particular color you need to put there. And then they're also over here on the side, because obviously as soon as you start stacking blocks on these spots, they're going to be covered up and you won't be able to see them anymore. So it's nice that they're kind of there on the side. Anyway, you're going to do that until the end game condition's it's not hard to understand, but basically if ever at the end of your turn any one color is exhausted, that's going to trigger the end of the game, and then finish out the round, and I think play one more round. And there's sort of these not wild, but extra cubes you can use for anything that's run out. Then you'll total up your scores. Whoever has the most points is going to win the game. Pretty plain and simple. Let's, honestly, that's kind of the whole game. It's not a particularly complex game. So let's kind of talk about some things that make the game special, or some things that I like a little less about it. So first of all, what makes the game special? Well, one thing that's really interesting is this idea of rolling the meeples. It could be like rolling a die. Honestly, it could be that, a 6 is you have a 6 and sort of 2, a 4 and a 5 and a 4, and then 1, 2, and 3 are busts, or some sort of different manipulations. In fact, I mentioned cubitos earlier, and that's kind of what it had, right? I mean, it had different dice, and some of them were blank on some sides and had symbols on others. And so if you got the symboled side, that was an active die, and if you got the blank side, well, that would be the blank one. So it's not like this isn't something that could have been done with another mechanism, but rolling the meeples is just kind of fun, right? There's not a whole lot of games that use them in that sort of way. And so that feels kind of new, feels kind of different. And even though, at its core, it's just rolling dice, the way that these are shaped and the way that they are, and sort of rolling into that little box, is just a lot of fun. It's a nice experience. And it also doesn't let you really math out the probabilities that much, because I don't know if a meeple is more likely to land on its side versus on its feet. That's not math that my brain can do. Although, to be fair, my brain can't do a lot of math anyway. But but it's sort of an interesting use of the mechanism. It's also another thing that makes it special about the game. It's a lot of fun to sort of build up these buildings, right? I mean, who doesn't love essentially playing with Legos? But stacking up these buildings, building them up high, capping them off. It's an interesting experience. The rules are super simple. There's not a lot of strategic depth to this game. It's not going to be something somebody writes strategy books about, but it's very easy to sort of pick up, roll your die, meeples, and just sort of roll with it. You are making some decisions, right? Because you only have access to 10. At the beginning of the game, you only have 4. But ultimately, if you have more than 10, you have to put some aside and use only 10 on a turn. So, there is some decisions on that. You're sort of completing the buildings in the right order, because they might score based upon what's around them. They might score based upon different types of buildings you have. And so, you are making choices in this, and you're trying to think, okay, do I want to build a bunch of small buildings, or do I want to build, just a couple of great big ones? The sort of glass and blue steel resource, the clear and the blue, are a little harder to come by, because you can't get them with the meeples out of the box. You're out of the gate. You have to sort of buy buildings and build your way up to them. Although you can do a trade. You can trade any 2 blocks in for another, or for the blue ones, you have to trade in 3. But so, the rules, though, what I'm trying to say is they're not all that complicated. And so it's very easy to teach. It'll work well with people who just want to have a good time with the game and don't necessarily want it to burn out their brains. It's a good length, and I'll say it like this. It has the potential to be a good length. And that is because when you're playing the game, ideally, everyone's going to take care of their rolling when it's not their turn. So I take my turn, I do all my actions, and then you start your turn. Meanwhile, I'm doing my roll, re-roll, re-roll. And so I'm already ready by the time my turn comes around. And because of that, if people are able to keep the cadence up, there's not really any downtime in the game. All right, maybe somebody has a lot of rolling to do because the meeples all keep lying on their back or something, but generally it's going to move at a pretty good clip. Now, if you're playing with a group that doesn't want to do that, right? The game says you can force people to kind of do all their rolling at the start of their turn. I tried that one time. That drags the game down significantly. I mean, that'll add a few minutes to each person's turn, which over the course of the game is going to add, 45 minutes to an hour. And that's really an unwelcome addition. So totally, absolutely, you want to do all that part simultaneously. There's another bonus kind of thing that's a little bit special, and that is that there's this extra game that comes with it, and basically it's this gorilla meeple, and the person who wins the game plays the role. After you finish the game, you sort of drop this gorilla onto the city and try and knock over buildings, and then people drop their meeples on top of it trying to knock over the gorilla. It's a stupid bonus game, but it's also kind of fun, right? I mean, you've already finished the game. Why not, right? Why not drop a gorilla on your city and knock the cubes everywhere? But make sure you're playing on a table that has a rim if you're going to do that. Otherwise, the blocks will fly everywhere. Anyway, so those are some things that make the game special. There's also a lot of different scoring different scoring goals, things you can focus on. You can kind of customize your experience. So where then is the but? Well, a couple of things. One, I mentioned that if you're not able to play with simultaneous rolling, the game drags. I mean, the game is interminable at that point. So, I mean, I will not play it unless we can kind of, okay, first turn maybe just so we see how we're doing it. But then, everybody just kind of take care of your rolling when it's not your turn. Second thing, the icons themselves are pretty clear. But once you start stacking the cubes, it's hard to see what you need. And, I did point out that there's those little tiny numbers on the side, and those are useful, but they're really tiny. I mean, they're just so small that unless you're right on top of them, they'll be difficult to see. Also, you can build anywhere. I mean, you can kind of, you have to pay a penalty if you build far away from your stuff, but it is possible that you'll have buildings in different parts of the board. And so if you're not able to see them, it can be a little bit different. I mean, it can hurt the experience a little bit. Also, the special abilities of those ones with the purple meeples, really tiny font. I really wish that there were a way to do that. There's a lot of artwork on the tiles that's not really all that engaging. It's just kind of pieces of building. And maybe that's another but, is that the artwork isn't all that great in this game. But I just wish there were a way to make it easier to see. Another but, and this is actually my biggest concern with the game, is the rule book is not great. And what I mean by that is, sort of the phases of the game, how to play is fine, but it does not explain all of the buildings and all of the building scoring. In fact, it says some buildings have conditional scoring. Look at page 11 or whatever. And on page 11, it describes 5 buildings. And you have, I don't know, 50 that you might end up coming across in the game. I mean, there's these huge stacks of building tiles, which, by the way, are hard to shuffle. And I just wish, it seems to be a trend, especially with actually AEG games, where they will just explain a few of the scoring things and leave you to figure out the rest. And sometimes it's not that clear. And I really wish there were an appendix to the rule book that would explain all of the scoring, even if it's not necessary. I'd rather have it there than have gaps in the information that you've got to kind of piece together yourself. That was kind of a disappointment. Also, I mentioned that there's 18 buildings, I believe, available for purchase at a time. And again, the size of the font and things on this is going to make that part very difficult to do, just because no matter where you sit on the table, you won't be able to see everything. So anyway, those are some negatives. They're not huge negatives. In fact, none of them are really gameplay negatives, but the presentation of the game is a little bit lackluster, I guess is what I would say. So where do I come down on it? What's my final rating? Well, I'll give Rolling Heights an 8 out of 10. I did say I don't like Cubitos. Cubitos was a miss for me. This one, again, it has a lot of the same mechanisms. It just does. But for some reason, the fact that you're rolling the meeples and building the buildings, that's just so much fun for me that it boosts it up a little bit from sort of its predecessor game. It's definitely not worth buying for that little ape thing that you throw out at the end of the game. That's just silly fun. But the game itself will work well with families. It'll work well with casual gamers. It'll work well with sort of serious Euro gamers as long as you can get them to sort of sit back and just kind of roll with it. It is possible really to get some AP in this game, especially with those 18 buildings you can choose from. So, as long as people can keep things going, I think the game will work well with just about anyone. Its playtime is good if you play it with sort of simultaneous rolling, and I've really enjoyed my plays of it. There's also a solo game, and I haven't tried that yet. I would like to, and I will, but for now, I'm just sort of evaluating it based on plays with multiple people. Anyway, there you have it. It is an 8 out of 10. A game I would recommend that you check out. I don't know that you necessarily need to buy it. I don't know that shtick is going to be fresh and new each time you play. But, for me, it's going to be something that, when someone's over and says, I want to play something that really doesn't feel like anything else, it's one that I'll think of because it really doesn't feel like anything else. Anyway, there you have it. That's my final rating on Rolling Heights. And that's also the end of another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. I'm going to be back next week to talk about something board game related. We will see what it is at that time. But until then, I'm going to wish you well. I'm going to wish you safe travels and courage when you need it. And I will see you next time on another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.